Hey, screw you, dude. Rank Creepshow already.
Right? But then he also said this.
Now, currently, I'm working on the Creepshow ranking video, but I'm also, at the moment, in the process of moving as well.
And that was like, over a year ago.
Okay, I get it. I'll rank Creepshow. Okay, I think I can finally pull this off. Creepshow 2019 is an anthology-based television series that originally aired exclusively on Shudder, but now you can pretty much watch this show anywhere. This show serves as a direct continuation from the 1982 movie with the same name, which doesn't really mean much in the long run, considering that both the show and the movies were anthology-based. So outside of the name brand recognition, the only carryover from the films are seemingly this little titular character called the Creep. He's essentially here to just bookend each story, in a very similar vein to the Curious in the show Creeped Out. Huh. Both shows have Creep in the title. What a cute little coincidence. But this show has a total of 4 seasons spanning over 25 episodes and even 2 specials. But let's go over what exactly I will be ranking this time around. First and foremost, these 2 specials, I won't be covering them in this video.
Boo! Every means every. Just another clickbait title from Simply Colin. More like simply wasting my time.
Wasting your time? All you do all day is get drunk and watch Jeremy Lin highlights.
Hey, Lynn's sanity is still real to me, damn it.
Besides the point, the specials are actually something I want to cover individually in another video down the line. Eventually. Second off, there is a total of 23 episodes, so 23 rankings, right? Well, no. You see, Creepshow has 2 stories per episode, and it would kind of be unfair to rank entire episodes as one cohesive experience, especially if one story is a masterpiece and the other one is just dog shit. Which, by the way, no spoilers, but there's a couple of episodes like that. So I will be ranking the stories within the episodes instead of the episodes itself, meaning that out of 23 episodes, there's a total of 45 stories, and therefore 45 rankings. Now, you may be thinking, shouldn't it be 46? Well, there's one episode in this entire series that just has one story. It's essentially a 2-parter. And with that, we're ready to rank this bad boy.
Whoa, no way. The short intro. It's been so long since we had a short intro.
I know, right? It's mainly because we've been covering a lot of serialized shows on this channel recently, and because of that, we have to go over things like characters and plots before we even get into the ranking itself. But strictly anthology-based shows, like Creepshow, we don't gotta do that. Anyways, sit back and relax as I rank every single episode of Creepshow from worst to best. Enjoy. Creepshow as a show has a lot of love for the horror genre, and throughout this series, there's a lot of cute little references to other classic horror films. Whether it's a Killer Clowns from Outer Space lunchbox or The Stuff from, well, The Stuff. But there's a point where referencing said horror medias can be a bit taxing. Skeletons in the Closet is the perfect example of this. Almost every line of dialogue is just a nod or a quote or a reference to some other horror movie, to the point where it kind of feels like I'm watching The Big Bang Theory, and like the later seasons when they really didn't give a shit. On one hand, I understand. This kind of corny, cringy dialogue makes sense for these types of characters. They're horror super nerds that run a horror-themed prop museum. Their place of business is built around their love for the horror genre. But at the same time, it's way too much, and it's really painful to sit through after a certain point. I mean, 5 minutes in, and I was ready to tap out. Which is a shame, because the actual central concept behind this episode is quite good. It's just about these 2 nerds who get outbid by this one dude, and instead of admitting defeats, they just straight up kill the guy and put his bones on display. No, wait a minute. Did I miss something? Because that is quite the escalation.
I mean, you did summarize, but that was the order of operations here.
And this is Creepshow after all, so of course the skeleton comes alive and goes on a murderous, vengeful rampage, complete with a bunch of different horror movie homages like Psycho and The Shining. And this is more of the referential material that I like. It's cute, it's quick, it serves a fun purpose, and more importantly, it's all visuals. It's not some nerdy babble or some geeky diatribe. It's just, hey, we're gonna have this one girl killed off like in Psycho, or hey, we're gonna have this poor other worker get killed by the orb from Phantasm. And this whole episode concludes in a truly spectacular skeleton fight sequence. Now, it may not be much, and it is really short, but this skeleton fight is truly the saving grace for this entire episode. Now, no way in hell does it make up for everything else, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. And I don't quite really know if these skeletons are truly utilizing stop motion animation, or if it's just CGI mimicking stop motion animation akin to Ray Harryhausen, but either way, I love it. It's a complete slog to get through, but the ending almost makes it worth it. You know, Creeped Out had an episode about sirens, and if you watch my ranking video on that show, you would know that one ranked dead last, so maybe sirens just aren't scary. I'll give the episode a little credit. They are at least unique within their portrayal of a siren, as they are quick to dispel the typical portrayal as a mermaid-like creature, and instead they go for more of a bat or harpy kind of rendition. But other than that, oh boy. Where do I start? This whole episode is centered around this one girl and her roommate who is a siren. The siren roommate in question has grown tired of being a siren and wants to be mortal. Meanwhile, the mortal roommate wants to be a siren. And apparently, all it takes to swap roles is a little surgery where the two exchange vocal cords. So they kidnap a doctor to perform this procedure. The only problem being that, yeah, he's a doctor, but more specifically, he's a gynecologist. There's a joke in here somewhere, but I'm at least dignified enough to stay in my own lane. I'm a dick joke guy. Plain and simple. So they force him to do the surgery. Of course the main character's life is on the line. They're threatening to kill him if he doesn't pull off the surgery successfully, and yet there's no sense of tension or suspense in this scene. Like, the dude's a gynecologist. He doesn't really do surgery like this. I should be on the edge of my seat wondering if this guy can really pull off this surgery, but like, he pulls it off no problem. And listen, this wouldn't be the end of the world if this episode had other things going on, but like, it doesn't. The majority of this episode is just these three characters standing around and talking. I mean, we do get to see the siren's true form at one point, and that's really cool, and the costume and makeup is really good.
At the same time, though, the makeup and costumes throughout the entire series are pretty consistently good, all things considered.
There's a cute little double cross at the end, but then the episode's just over. It's a slower episode for sure, with lower stakes than normal episodes, which is all good and fine. But ultimately, not much really happens, and it's a little boring, all things considered. This episode has one of the worst opening 7 minutes I've ever seen in any show, and it sucks, because I get what they're trying to go for, and the concept is definitely there, it's just that the execution falls flat. You see, this episode starts with this teenage girl recounting her past week to some student counselor. Basically, she thinks her brother is trying to kill her. Now, this is a teenage girl telling a story here, so it's filled with hyperbole, and she gets sidetracked easily and talks about other things too. It's also filled with a bunch of teenage slang that just sounds horrible and out of touch. Now, I actually really like when characters retell stories from their own perspectives and interject their own personalities into said stories. There's a great X-Files episode where Mulder and Scully retell the same story but from their own perspectives, and it is hilarious. But in this scenario, it is just painful. Now, the story does pick up after this opening, but unfortunately, not by much. As I explained before, our main character believes that her brother is trying to kill her, and well, that's because he is. See, as it turns out, our main character at some point was turned into a vampire and killed her parents. However, she doesn't remember any of this. The brother actually has to tell her what's going on. And while they stand there and face each other, they have this really witty conversation about vampires, and they crack a couple of jokes.
Idiot. It's supposed to be a comedic episode.
No, I know that, but it's just that the comedy really doesn't land for me. They trace all this back to another girl who's like the head vampire and kill her. It's a fun sequence and probably the only fun sequence in this entire episode, but then they kill the student counselor? Not because she's a vampire, but just because she was putting together too many puzzle pieces. Like, that seems a little cruel and unfair. And she wasn't a great character by any means, but she was a completely innocent character. I guess you can chalk it up to this episode's sense of humor. I think overall, this episode was really banking on its comedy, which is subjective, I know, but if it doesn't work for you, like me, then this episode just doesn't work at all. The only thing this episode truly has going for it are these creature effects. Because not only does this look amazing, but the creature design in and of itself is also fantastic. But everything else in this episode, yeah, it's hard to like. For one, I think it's a little out of touch when it comes to teenagers and celebrity culture. The episode centers around these three teens who all love this pop star who is set to give birth, and like, there's this weird obsession throughout the start of this episode about her giving birth. Like, all of these teens and all the news coverage talks about how this super famous pop star is giving birth. And all three of these teens want to go see it in person for different reasons. One wants to go to take photos of the baby because the press would buy those for a high price, I guess. One wants to go because she's like a super fan. And the other kind of just wants to go because her friends want to go, which like, these are high schoolers after all. Fear of missing out is the biggest driving factor at that age. But this obsession from these kids and the news media obsessing over the famous pop star giving birth seems a little out of touch for me.
Isn't this whole scenario supposed to be, over-exaggerated on purpose?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I think it clashes tonally. Like, I understand that this episode is supposed to be lampooning the celebrity-crazed society that we live in, but at the same time, there's this scene where these kids accidentally kill this one security officer, and it's treated with the utmost weight and seriousness. It's a pretty heavy scene, even if it's undercut almost immediately. I'm just saying, even with the premise at hand, I don't think these characters' motives are strong enough to carry them through the plot of this episode. But hey, these creature effects are some of the best in the series, and the body horror is just off the charts here, which is a shame. I have to censor most of this for YouTube. Unless you're watching the uncensored members only version. Hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. This episode's downfall is at the hands of its one-dimensional characters. I get that this was kind of the point and the overall message of the episode, but at the same time, I think just a couple extra layers to better flesh out these characters would have worked wonders at creating a stronger narrative, and also a theme with a little bit more nuance. I'm gonna keep it honest with you guys. This isn't a horrible episode by any means. It's just a rather boring episode. It just doesn't really do anything for me. If anything, it's a very standard isolation story centered around this research team in Antarctica. The basic plot is that this research team finds some object that can summon some sort of interdimensional monster, and our main character ends up killing people because of some illusions this monster creates.
Oh man, same thing happens to me when I microdose.
You need help, man. So after he gets caught and arrested and right before his execution, he has one last request to use said object to summon the interdimensional monster, and it kills everyone. And that's the whole episode. And everything else this episode has to offer, it just feels like it's going through the motions, and other than that, I don't have too much to say about this one. This episode is just really boring, and nothing really happens until the very end. And the build up to the ending isn't particularly engaging or even effective. A lot of this episode could just be summed up as waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when it does, I'm kind of past the point of caring. Just like waiting for the fan game Mother 4 to finally come out. I mean, winter 2014, anyone?
Once again, nobody's gonna get that.
This episode is about this couple running a haunted bed and breakfast. Supposedly, the woman's great-grandmother was one of the first female murderers in the United States. And one day, a true crime influencer comes to stay the night. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of internet influencers being used in stories like this. Usually, they're written so poorly and so out of touch, and usually use a lot of slang or lingo that is horribly outdated within a year or so. Ultimately, these writers just don't understand how these internet personalities actually work. And while there is some of that here, it's actually on the tamer side and it's not horribly egregious. So I'll give it a pass. But night after night of nothing happening, and eventually the influencer supposedly debunks the whole tale about the first female murderer, so the couple just decides to murder the influencer themselves, which immediately proves to be popular, as those reservations start flowing in. But in an uncharacteristic moment, the guy performs a confusing heel turn and murders his partner. Like, I understand that he's doing it because he realizes that murder will bring in business, but at least to me, he was never super obsessed with the money, nor really showed any hatred towards his partner.
I mean, money does bring out the worst in people. Just ask my bitch ex-wife.
Wait, you were married? And don't worry, the guy meets his demise in the end anyhow. I know probably through this summary this episode sounds good, but really, I'm cutting out a lot of the boring parts that this episode is filled with. Honestly, much like a lot of these lower ranking entries, only the final act is really good and exciting, while everything else is, well, not that. This one is just a whatever episode. And at least for a majority of these lower ranking episodes, there's at least some redeeming qualities to be had. Like maybe the concept is good, but the execution is bad. Or maybe the concept was bad, but the execution was good. Or they just had some kick-ass creature effects. Dope creature effects are always going to help out on an episode spot within the ranking. But this episode is just wild to me because outside of its central message, I really don't understand what this episode was trying to accomplish. Like, this episode revolves around this one photographer who won some sort of reward for this photo. This man took a photo of this father and his son struggling to stay alive in some sort of war. He could have helped out, but decided to stay behind to take the perfect shot. So like, what the episode is trying to say is pretty obvious in that regard. But while him and his wife are celebrating, a random man comes up and takes a Polaroid photo of the two. They receive the photo and the man disappears. But the photo is of the two of them eating dinner, but it's from a distance further away than from where it was taken. So they go over to where the photo would have been taken from that distance and find another photo of them taken from another distance away. Except this time, they learn that somehow these photos are being updated in real time. So it acts as one big scavenger hunt with photo after photo, until eventually the last photo is of their kid. So they rush home and he's actually alright. He's just chilling. But then they see the same stranger out by their pool, and the guy tackles him and drowns him in the water. But then it turns out that he was drowning his own son. And this whole thing is caught in a photo and fucking...
Oh, dude, I don't care.
I know it may seem unfair how I'm treating this episode, But honestly, this whole thing is conceptually really intriguing, but the payoff is so whatever, and that's the only way I can explain it. I think this one only ranks a little bit higher than the previous entries is because, at least for the first half of this episode, it really did have me hooked. But the back half, it's completely forgettable and sloppy. Outside of some really good gore effects that you guys unfortunately won't get to see because I gotta censor them for YouTube, this episode is pretty bad, but a fun kind of bad. Like Resident Evil 6. It's not a good game, but damn, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have any fun with it. So yeah, despite ranking so low, I actually recommend you guys check out this episode, ironically enough. I think the main problem with this episode ultimately comes down to its lack of stakes. Let me explain. You see, there's this new fat loss medication, and by medication, I mean, worms. It's just giant worms. Or leeches more than anything, but whatever. These worms latch onto a person and completely suck the fat out of their body within seconds. I mean, a fat dude walks in, and a skinny dude walks out.
Ozempic ain't got shit on these worms.
But this procedure isn't for the public yet, and it's still in the beta stages of testing. So only a select few people can actually get sucked by this worm. And our main character actually doesn't go through this procedure, which is a good thing too, because as it turns out, these leeches were implanting dormant eggs into their hosts that end up hatching in a rather explosive fashion under a solar eclipse. So anyone that has had this operation bursts open, giving birth to hundreds of worms. However, it's not like a disease. Like, these tiny worms are completely harmless and act more as a gross visual more than anything else. And it's a great visual, but it's not a threat. Also, our main character never went through the procedure, so his life really isn't in danger. And that's the biggest problem here. The only people said to die are the people that got sucked by the worm. Now, this could be horrific on a global scale, like if half of all the population just exploded into worms. But that's the problem. The procedure was only in the beta stages, so presumably only a couple of people and half of this newscast are set to die. It's a fucked up massacre, if anything else. But the only character we're really invested in this story is the main character. You could maybe argue this woman who they built up throughout this episode as well, but really, I was never attached.
Because you're a misogynist?
No, it's because they don't give this character anything to work with. I think they could have built her up a little bit more and made her death a little more meaningful, but they didn't. If there's any positive that I can give this episode, it's that the final massacre is a lot of fun to watch, and overall the message is pretty good, but everything else, I need a reason to care about these characters a little bit more. If there's one word I could use to describe this episode, it would be melodramatic. Now, I love me a good drama, but there is a thing of being a little too much. After the third tearful conversation in a 25-minute story, I start to roll my eyes a bit. But ultimately, this whole episode is just conversations between different characters talking about the exact same shit. You see, this episode centers around a family, and this family unfortunately lost their father. Their father was a pretty stand-up guy, but for the last couple of months before his death, he started obsessing about the Loch Ness Monster, and he was attempting to find it when he ultimately drowned to death. But now in the present, they now have a stepdad who is, well, a stepdad. He doesn't have a job, he treats the mom like shit. He's verbally abusive as well as physically abusive, so at least we know who's gonna die at the end.
Whoa, man. Spoilers.
Is it really though? But the daughter in this episode is headstrong about finding the monster for herself to prove that her dad didn't die in vain. And that's what this whole episode is centered around. The daughter and the stepdad have this really melodramatic conversation, with him telling her to stop all this shit. And then the daughter and mother have a melodramatic conversation. And then the daughter and brother have a melodramatic conversation. And then at the end, when they find the monster washed up on the shore, the daughter, brother, and daughter's love interest all have a melodramatic conversation about it, complete with the love interest carving the name of the dad onto the monster so he will be remembered forever. Oh yeah, the daughter has this love interest throughout the entire episode too. He's just kind of there. But it's a shame too, because I think the drama here is pretty good, but it's all kind of one note and too repetitive. Like, what is here works really well, but when I have to listen to the same conversation over and over again with slightly different perspectives and insights, it gets a bit grating and loses its impact. If this episode could only shave off a couple of minutes, then this would have been pretty good. I think this one's the most forgettable episode of Creepshow because when I was writing this script, this was the only episode I had to refer back to my notes to even remember what this episode was about. I really think that's just because this episode just doesn't leave an impression on me. It just lacks impact. And I think a lot of that just boils down to how been there, done that this episode feels. Now, the idea and concept itself is innately its own thing. I mean, I don't think there's another story out there about a prisoner being able to control spiders. But at the same time, this execution just goes through the motions. I mean, it's about an innocent, well-meaning man stuck in prison being bullied by other inmates and even this officer. And yeah, it's because he's a little strange and likes spiders, which can feel a little grade schooly at times. But this episode quickly clarifies it's also because the man used to be a pharmacist, so they force him to make drugs and participate in their illegal drug operation. Long story short, one inmate kills this guy's spider, and then another spider bites him in his eye, which is actually really horrific and made me wince, even if it looks just a tad bit funny. So our main character has had enough. And what I mean by has had enough is that he's had enough of living and decides to sacrifice himself to his big pet spider so he could become even bigger and stronger so he can take on this one cop in the night. So the next morning, everyone sees this one cop all strung up in web, just completely hollowed out, with the one spider looking more like a Skulltula from the Zelda series. And that's it. It's a really strong, striking, and shocking final image to end the episode on, and it's really effective. But outside of that, like I said before with these lower ranking entries, most of the episode is not very good, but the final act is. I can't tell if this episode has a pacing problem, or if it's just boring, or maybe more realistically,
It's probably just both.
you see, there is a lot of moving parts that require a lot of setup and a lot of exposition. Not that this episode doesn't have the time to do so. This story segment is nearly half an hour long, when typically these segments are anywhere from 19 to 23 minutes long. But I think that's perhaps the problem here. You really feel the additional length in this one, and the story that is there is fine enough, but it's nothing spectacular. I mean, it's a Monkey's Paw episode. And for anyone that's not in the know, the Monkey's Paw is a pretty popular horror MacGuffin that's used throughout countless different types of media. My favorite use being in the Treehouse of Horror segment. But essentially the Monkey's Paw will grant wishes with some fucked up, ironic, unforeseen consequences.
Turkey's a little dry. The turkey's a little dry. Oh, the cursed thing!
And that's exactly what happens here, as this man and his wife use the Monkey's Paw to do good things in the world, and seemingly, there really wasn't a lot of consequences involved until the very last wish. The couple was having money problems, so the wife decided to wish for, well, some money. And well, she technically got her wish because she ends up falling and dying, but her life insurance ends up getting them out of their financial rut. This leaves the old man horribly depressed and lonely, so he decides to use the Monkey's Paw for himself to wish his wife back. And Well, she comes back all right, but she's a rotting corpse, constantly in pain and covered in maggots. And this should be a great scene, by all means. But then she just starts attacking the old guy like some stereotypical zombie? Like, I don't know. I think the horror of having to see a loved one in pain and then having to kill them again is disturbing enough. And just reducing that down to a typical zombie kind of lessens the emotional impact of this scene. I feel like this should have been the main emphasis of this episode. Instead, it's just a flashback the old man tells this criminal on the run, who he technically wished for via the monkey's paw to come and kill him. She says she's not gonna do that. She doesn't even believe the old man's story to be real, but bing bang bop, she ends up killing him accidentally anyways. So then in like the final minutes, the girl ends up believing in the monkey's paw, and then takes it to the morgue to wish her husband back to life. Like, did she really not learn anything from this man's story? But of course, all of the bodies in the morgue end up resurrecting, and that's where the episode ends. Like, I understand the episode wanting to end on a more ambiguous, scary ending, but I think the woman killing the old man and then leaving would have been a better and more somber ending, and one that's more reflective of the rest of the episode's tone. Overall, I think this episode lacked focus, but it's a solid episode, just kind of weighed down by its pacing. This is an episode about a guy who goons too much and then his wife kills him because of it.
No, it's not.
Dude, I'm not lying. Just watch the entire episode yourself.
Fine, I will. Oh my god. He wasn't lying.
To be fair, there's a couple of factors at play, and it's not like Homeboy over here is just straight jerking it the entire time. Kind of. But this episode sees our main character inventing a completely immersible VR machine that allows people to transport themselves into movies. His movie of choice being the 1972 Horror Express, which is a real movie, by the way. It's public domain and whatnot, and yeah, this episode essentially forced Gumps his way into a legit movie. And for anyone wondering if they got the actual rights to Horror Express to use in this episode, Horror Express is a public domain movie. So that's how this is possible. And I'm kind of mixed on the visuals here, because in some scenes, the main character matches perfectly with the environment. Sometimes the lighting can be a bit off, and other times, he just looks horribly out of place, and it's very obviously green screened in. So it's a real mixed bag. However, I will say, I think it gets noticeably worse throughout the episode. The best it's going to look is at the start at the train station. It's almost bang on for certain shots. But yes, the main character's true intentions with entering this film's world is to fuck the lead actress. Something his wife finds out about, prompting her to kill him by trapping him in the machine by cutting off his thumb, making it impossible to exit, and sending him into the world of the Night of the Living Dead. Oh yeah, it's established that if you die in VR, you die in real life. This may seem like an overreaction at first, but there's actually a lot of factors here that make this kind of reasonable. Like, this couple has only been married for 1 year, and in that 1 year of marriage, this dude has only been focused on inventing this VR machine. So even before all the gooning, homegirl wasn't getting any. Plus, apparently, her dad has been lending our main character lots and lots of money so he can make this thing. So she ain't getting fucked, he owes her dad a lot of money, and he's jacking it to virtual pussy? I don't condone murder, but pop off, queen. I think this episode has a really cool concept at hand, but it's kind of squandered a bit. I mean, we only see this guy go into 2 different movies, and even then, when he's in Horror Express, he's just trying to bone this one girl, and it's pretty lame. It actually builds up to this pretty big disconnect, because the real drama of the episode comes from the wife's perspective, but a majority of the episode is focused on the guy in the Horror Express, and it's just nothing. It's just the main character talking to people he's trying to fuck. I think him movie hopping would have been a more fun idea. Like, I love the ending scene where he's in the movie of the Night of the Living Dead. He doesn't give a shit about the characters or the zombies because he knows he's in a movie and he can leave at any time. That's hilarious. Or if not that, give less screen time to these escapades and focus more on the wife's slowly declining mental state, because that's where the real meat and potatoes of the storyline is at. And not this dude trying to fuck. I don't have too much to say about this one, to be honest. This episode revolves around a rebellious teen and an overprotective mother who really puts other bad mothers to shame.
Insert your mom joke here.
Insert overreaction here. Basically, the mother has collected all of her daughter's baby teeth and ended up making some sort of homunculus. And the gradual creature effects in this episode are really good. But the rest of the episode after this point is just about these two teen girls fighting off this homunculus creature. And it's fun and effective, but that's kind of all I gotta say about it. I think the build up to this point is a tad bit slow, if not impactful, and the action in the final act is good, if not a bit goofy, but all in all, it's just a little below average for me. This episode is for anyone that hates their landlord out there.
So, literally everybody.
Yeah. So, literally everybody out there. This episode sees a plumber working on some pipes in an apartment complex as he is bossed around by this completely over-the-top landlord who is just a little bit too cartoonishly evil for my liking. You see, it's a trend amongst these Creepshow episodes to have a central antagonist who is just the worst person in every which way. Sometimes it's portrayed very seriously, and sometimes it's over the top and completely campy. And both styles are totally fine and effective. I mean, the end goal for each is to make us cheer for when they die horribly in the end. However, in this episode, I feel like this landlord is just way too much for me. Like, she has no intention of concealing her lack of care for her tenants. And she very openly hates everybody that lives in her apartment complex. And actually, maybe I'm wrong, because this is just starting to sound like every landlord out there. Jokes aside, I just needed this performance to be dialed back a little bit, and I'm completely on board. I mean, if you want a good example for how over the top she is, she doesn't refer to any of her tenants by their name. Instead, she refers to them by their number on their apartment. But outside of that, this episode is just about this plumber fighting some sort of monster comprised of hair and sludge, and it's fucking disgusting. Which is to say, it's great. I love this design. It also just latches onto anything and everything, and it's impossible to get off, unless you don't care about losing some flesh in the process. Of course, in the end, the landlord ends up getting what she deserves, and everything goes back to normal. This episode is ultimately a little one note. It's just about fighting this hair pipe monster, and that's about it. I mean, this episode does have a message, if it wasn't obvious enough, but it's nothing crazy. In the end, it's a solid, fun time. I think the last Subaraya is ultimately held down by its costume and creature effects, which is a strange thing to say for a Creepshow episode, considering that this series is generally pretty good when it comes to both departments. But unfortunately, this is the only episode where I feel like it looks, well, bad. That being said, the rest of the episode I think is pretty solid with a couple of missteps. A billionaire buys the last painting made by an artist called Subaraya, which has never been seen by the public or really anyone, as it was painted shortly before his death 100 years ago, and the billionaire just burns the painting before anyone else besides himself can lay eyes on it. A billionaire being a dickhead? No, that can't be. Yeah, it's seemingly for completely petty reasons. Point blank, he wanted to be the one and only person in the entire world to witness this painting. So, yeah. That's next level of douchebaggery, but in ways that I think is really fun and comical. But the billionaire is then proceeded to be haunted by the monster in the final painting, and it just doesn't look good. Even in low light settings, this monster still looks like a monster from the Power Rangers, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Power Rangers had some really fun and cool monster designs. However, this is supposed to be scary, and nah. It's really not doing it for me. It's cool though. Now that being said, I think the lead up to the monster is really good and eerie, and it's just, once the monster is fully formed, then it goes all downhill from there. So the billionaire kills the monster, where it turns out that the monster was Subaraya all along, as he was so consumed by his hatred of the world that he ended up getting trapped into his final painting. But since the billionaire released him by killing him, the billionaire is now slowly morphing into the monster. However, he makes the noble sacrifice and ends up taking his own life before the transformation is completed, which is a solid ending, all things considered, but honestly, I'd rather just watch an episode of Power Rangers. Cheat Code isn't an amazing episode by any means. I mean, look at where it ranked. But I think it's a really fun episode, if not a little bit misguided. You see, it's essentially a video game creepypasta.
Ooh, when are you gonna do a video game creepypasta ranking?
I mean, that does sound like a lot of fun, but I'll do it if the fan demand is there. You know, eventually. But it does have an emotional through line to kind of ground the story that I think needed more emphasis. You see, after our main character's mom passes away, he becomes distant and unwilling to talk about his emotions with his dad, and through the power of video games, they are slowly able to reconnect as father and son. Which is really funny because Creeped Out actually had a very similar episode, but the roles were reversed. That episode is about a son trying to reconnect with his father through video games after a divorce. That episode is also about time travel, so a little different. Besides the point. But the main character's father tries to reconnect to his son through an old video game he played as a kid. That game being Weird Wednesday, which is an Atari game, said to be an 8-bit game, and looks like a Flash game from 2015. So, I don't know. Basically, it's just a side-scroller where you have to dodge a bunch of different objects, all of which will horribly kill the player character. Cutting right to the point, the game affects the real world. If you enter this cheat code, you get sucked into the game, or rather, the game becomes your reality in the real world. It's strangely convoluted, but whatever. One of our main character's friends ends up dying in a car crash because of this. I also just want to point out that neither of these two ever see the car accident. In fact, by the time the episode ends, they never fully acknowledge the friend's death. There's one passing line once they figure out what's going on, but it's given no weight, and it's like, damn, did these kids ever care about this guy in the first place? But really, the heart of this episode is this father and son relationship stuff, and if there's anything that I will praise, it's this very dynamic. The rest of the episode is just this video game stuff that, as I described before, is weirdly implemented. It also just looks a little bit goofy and it's kind of hard to take seriously. And don't get me wrong, it's fun and I'll give it that, but I'm not fully absorbing the sense of peril here. I think this episode is a really good baseline for Creepshow as a show, the litmus test for all other episodes, because truly, this is as standard as it comes. It doesn't do anything great, but it also doesn't do anything horrible. It's as middle of the road as it gets.
Wow, just like this very YouTube channel.
Artie, please. We're below average at best and complete slop at worst. It's just a super simple story, and usually that can be a good thing, but I think in this scenario, it ultimately just lacks a little bit of depth. I mean, it's a story that's been done before in various different renditions. A struggling author gets a hat that just makes him absolutely cracked at writing books. I mean, when he's wearing this hat, he goes into a trance-like state and is just able to pump out book after book. All of which are bestsellers, by the way. This, however, makes him completely lose track of time, and because of that, his love life completely falls apart. It perfectly showcases the ramifications of obsessing over one's creative work. Or, it showcases what it's like to play old school RuneScape. I mean, You just get sucked in. But of course, the horror element reveals itself in the third act, when it's revealed that this Lucky Hat is actually some sort of parasitic creature that's been feeding off the main character. And it's a great creature design, and the effects are awesome, but, like, this thing is pretty easily defeated. The more I realize this thing just kind of looks like the head crabs from Half-Life. Now, there actually was a good natural build-up to this point. There was a couple of times before where the main character would struggle taking off the hat, and before he finally does for good, he's really reluctant to do so. Once again, it's good, if not just very standard stuff. I think this episode would rank higher if it was just shorter. This is a 28-minute episode, and I really think it would have been more effective if it was 18 to 20 minutes in length. Now, I understand, that's a significant amount of time that has to be cut out of the episode, but on the other hand, a majority of this episode is just our main character in a trance-like state, writing his books. I mean, just looking completely disgusting and ignoring his wife. We really do feel the passage of time, but on the other hand, it really draws out the episode. I'm ultimately a little split on the finger. There's a lot to love about this episode, mainly Bob, but there's also a lot that, I don't know, I'm a little mixed on. For starters, I think this episode is a little too cynical for me. It's a comedically inclined episode. Humor is at the forefront of the finger, with the main character constantly breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the audience, and I'm totally cool with that. Its attempts at darker humor really do land for me more often than not, but at certain points, it just gets a little mean-spirited. You can call me a pussy all you want, but I think this episode truly starts hitting its stride once Bob becomes a character. What starts as a severed finger through constant feeding slowly turns into this little creature that our main character happily names Bob.
Perfect name. No notes.
But Bob is chill as fuck. Dude just loves popcorn and a good soap opera. I mean, shit. I want to hang out with this guy. But the main character and Bob have a really fun dynamic. It's somewhere between how people talk to their pets and how people talk to their best friends. It's great. The only problem with Bob is that the boy is still hungry, and chicken nuggets in the freezer aren't fixing that. So now he just goes out into the night and kills people. Each time he brings back little pieces of his victims, which our main character has to dispose of. And this is where the humor really works for me. It's dark comedy at its very best, and it's still got a sense of cynicism to it, but I think Bob just kind of adds this sense of childlike sincerity to it that really makes the whole thing click for me. So in essence, the main character by himself is too cynical, but with the addition of Bob, it all kind of balances out for me. And in the end, the cops catch on to what's happening and throw our main character into the psych ward. So we end with our main character in a straitjacket saying that Bob will come and save him. It puts into question whether or not Bob was ever real to begin with. A real ambiguous ending that doesn't really matter. This episode was so comedic in tone that any sense of actual mystery in the end is completely lost. I mean, we're talking about an episode where Bob rips the nuts off this trucker guy. I'm not putting too much weight into this ending. Times are tough and Muskie Hollow is ultimately held back by its runtime. I think there's definitely a story here, but it just feels really rushed. Like, in the beginning, there's this whole air of mystery. There's a bunch of townsfolk locked up in some cages and some dude claiming that he's the mayor. And then their captors walk in and talk to them. And one of them is claiming to be the new mayor. And it's like, oh shit, what's going on here? Is this some sort of revolution? They talk about their execution and vaguely allude to what they all did to get him locked up in the first place. And slowly, as this episode continues, we get these little nuggets of information. And none of them make complete sense, but slowly, a bigger picture is being formed. And it's great to see. Like when they are finally dragged to these execution chairs. I mean, they don't look like standard electric chairs. And then someone talks about how they will experience what they put so many others through. This is all fantastic stuff. This is how you introduce a world, and it's done so organically too. And then they fuck it all up. Right before their execution, we get a massive lore dump on these characters and this world, and it's all done through these comic book panels. So check it out. This world takes place during a zombie apocalypse, and basically the people set to die pretty much ran the whole town and unfairly executed people for the sake of putting on a show. You see, in Muskie Hollow, they like to put people's heads above the ground in the middle of a football field, and then they release a bunch of zombies to slowly eat away at their brains. It's a pretty popular event, and all the attention went to the mayor's head, so he, and all the people you see here, basically worked together to collude and wrongfully imprison people in order to constantly put on a show. Which, I don't know, it's just zombies eating brains on the ground. After a couple of events, it's gonna be like pigeons eating seeds in the park. I just don't see how this could be popular for so long. But yeah, these guys are sent up and zombies eat their brains. Once again, everything beforehand is so masterfully done. So when this exposition dump explaining everything comes out of nowhere, I feel kind of cheated. Everything was so natural beforehand, and this just feels so jarring. This episode is only 13 minutes long, and I think it would have greatly benefited from being only like 5 minutes longer. Really just let this story resonate a little bit more. This episode asks a great moral question. Would you kill someone in order to marry the love of your life? And also preventing the world from being destroyed.
Man, I'd kill somebody if they messed up my Taco Bell order.
I think you got some problems there, buddy. You know, it's just these standard moral quandaries surrounding marriage. But I think the overall tension and suspense of this episode is pretty good. While at times I feel like it can get a bit drawn out and a bit dialogue heavy, like they explain the rules at depth to the point where it can get a little redundant, but overall, I think it's a pretty good time. To simplify the story, this guy is trying to marry his girlfriend, but there's a little hurdle in the way. You see, the bride-to-be's father doesn't approve of him, but is willing to give him his blessing if he does one little thing for him, and that's murder. You see, the father oversees what I like to call the monster pit, and every 15 years, a sacrifice must be made to the monster pit, or else great ancient elder monsters will awaken and destroy the world. The father character is getting a bit old and wants to know that his son-in-law is capable of carrying out what needs to be done. It's a good moral dilemma that I don't think really gets the attention it deserves. Most of the story is focused on the build-up to this revelation, or just explaining how the monster pit works. The actual mental battle of our main character having to decide who to sacrifice isn't given enough time. In fact, he rather quickly decides he's going to kill his cousin because, well, he doesn't have a partner or a lot of friends that would miss him, which is a shame because, I don't know, the dude seems pretty chill to me. Spoiler alert, he actually doesn't die. He somehow survives this. But because of that, the monster awakens and wreaks havoc. So this whole episode ends up with nobody getting what they wanted in the end. It's a very grounded story for a majority of the episode, so this batshit ending, I think, really took me by surprise, but it's an ending I can't help but to love. I'm gonna keep this one short and sweet because I don't have too much to say about it. After our main character's wife gets into some sort of car accident, she acts completely different. And when I say completely different, I mean, she's a fucking asshole. Just the meanest person on this planet. Well, one thing leads to another and she starts craving human flesh. You know, it's just the natural evolution of being an asshole. But now it's essentially up to the husband to provide for his wife's needs. And there's plenty of drama to go along with it. And there's a little bit of a cat and mouse game between the main character and this detective character throughout the entire episode. And it's all very solid. None of this is done poorly. All of this is good. However, I just had a hard time getting invested in this one. I honestly have no clue why. Blame the format in which I make these videos. I guess because possibly I was just feeling a little burnt out by the time I got to this episode. I don't know. But I can at least recognize it as a good story. It's just one I didn't particularly care for. Parent Death Trap is a fun episode I wish they pushed a little bit further, but what we end up with is still a good watch either way. This kid is growing up with these snobby rich parents who are just complete assholes, so he fucking kills them and manages to keep the murder under wraps for 4 years. Meanwhile, now in the present, he's unfortunately being haunted by his parents' ghosts. But not like in a scary or creepy way, but more like in a way where his parents are now constantly following him around and making snide and condescending comments about everything he does. It's genuinely funny, which becomes even more hilarious when our main character starts seeing this one girl. So now there's 2 targets for these ghosts to make fun of. There's a moment where they're about to have sex and the mom leaves them to give him privacy, but the dad stays to watch.
What the fuck?
But he's eventually dragged away by the mom. But this girl, despite the 2 getting married, isn't actually interested in the main character. She's only interested in his money.
Women, am I right?
No. What are you on about? But it's money he doesn't have. You see, when our main character killed his parents, he covered up the whole thing. And for the past 4 years, our main character has been telling people his parents are on vacation. So there's been no legal transfer of money or assets to the main character, because that would, kind of set off some red flags and get the IRS involved. And hey, charge me with murder. That's cool. But getting the IRS on my ass, now that's scary. So when wifey over here tries to kill our main character, it's all in vain because there's not a cent to this man's name. Then there's this sudden shift with the main character's parents telling him how proud they are of him and why they pushed him so much, and it's like pretty emotional, but totally unearned. These characters, in my eyes, are completely irredeemable, so I wonder why they even bothered trying. If anything, they should have doubled down on their shittiness. Anyways, long story short, she dies, and the main character finally gets charged with the murders, and now spends the rest of his days being haunted by the ghosts of his family and his wife's family. And honestly, if that was me in that scenario, just kill me. I've said this a lot on a lot of other rankings, but your enjoyment of this episode is going to be determined by how scary you find insects. But either way, there's at least one aspect to this episode I think universally everybody can enjoy, and that's Keith David. I mean, the dude has an absolutely perfect voice, and is an underrated actor, I'll tell you that much. He's not in the episode that much, all things considered. It's a rather small role. But hey, any amount of Keith David in my book is much appreciated. Really, this episode is all about this scummy exterminator fighting off a bunch of giant bugs. It's simple and it's effective, and these creature effects are amazing. Once again, Creepshow has some of the best practical effects out there as far as television is concerned. And when I say this man is scummy, I mean he's scummy. Like, he takes care of this therapist's roach problem, and then on the way out, he just plants more roaches on the property to get some repeat business out of her. And he also kills a bunch of homeless people. Keith David offers him a bunch of money to wipe out this homeless population so he can put up some new buildings or whatever. I should have started with that first, actually. That's definitely scummier. It's actually the catalyst for these giant bug attacks. And the episode likes to walk that fine line, making the audience question whether or not these giant bugs are real, or if they're all in the head of the main character. Kind of like guilt-induced illusions or whatever. This all ironically makes him go insane, and he ends up right back at the therapist's office to seek her guidance. And then he just starts shrinking for some reason. Sure, okay. And then the therapist swats him like a fly, which is cool to see her finally get payback and whatnot, but what about Chekhov's cockroach? At the start of the episode, we see him plant cockroaches at her place so he could come back for another job, and he never does. So it's kind of an ultimate setup, and makes for a massive payoff calling back to the very start of the episode. I mean, if he shrinks down and then is killed by the very same cockroaches he planted in the office in the very start of the episode, that's poetic justice. I only bring this up because the first time watching this, I 100% thought that's where they were going with this. But nah. I mean, hey, whatever. This episode is fun enough as is. It may not be the most emotional or complex story out there, but it's got Keith David and some fun creature effects. "20 Minutes with Cassandra" is a fun episode where, ironically, everything with Cassandra
fucking sucks.
I mean, we bicker a lot, but sometimes we just agree. You see, this episode is broken down into 3 segments: the Cassandra segments, the pizza guy segments, and the monster segments. I know this all sounds like complete nonsense, but hear me out. So one night, our main character is all alone when Cassandra comes knocking on her door and bursts into her home and screaming that a monster is chasing her. Of course, our main character doesn't believe her, but when a delivery man comes to her door, he gets got. So yeah, now the roles are flipped. Our main character is the one freaking out and Cassandra is all calm and collected. A complete role reversal that doesn't make sense on a first watch, but does on a rewatch. However, it's these exchanges that get stale rather fast. I mean, it's just our main character freaking out, and then Cassandra being all calm and chill and being like, let's play some board games, let's drink some wine together, just sit on the couch and relax. I get the innate comedy from the juxtaposition, but like, this is a 35-minute episode. It's quite long, and I don't think the title of the episode is lying. There is quite literally 20 minutes of Cassandra, when really, if it was tying it up, there should really only be about 10 minutes of Cassandra, because that's all I could stand. I don't mind the banter, but at a certain point, it just feels like padding, and the pacing really suffers because of it. Now, technically, I do think the pizza guy and the monster scenes go on a bit too long as well, and it does hinder the overall pacing. However, these 2 scenes are just like really good and cute and wholesome. You see, before Cassandra arrived, our main character ordered a pizza. So when the pizza guy does arrive, she goes outside on the balcony warning him to just turn around because there's a monster on the loose. And like, the pizza guy is legitimately one of the most positive and wholesome characters in quite literally any piece of fiction I have ever seen. He is just so nice and reassuring. Like, this whole conversation between the two had me smiling the entire time. It's too bad he still dies though. Legitimately the most devastated I have ever been over a character's death in any piece of fiction. And I read Steel Ball Run, so if you know, you know.
That's like the 3rd video now where you reference JoJo's in some way.
But upon still receiving the pizza, there's a note inside left by the monster telling the main character to meet him alone in the basement. So down in the basement, the monster talks for the first time and like, he speaks really eloquently. But it is here where the monster reveals that he is Cassandra's monster. Basically, if people don't befriend Cassandra, she just runs away and unleashes her monster onto said people. And well, after a little confrontation, that's exactly what happens here, and the monster comes in, and once again, they just have a really nice conversation. It's witty, and the banter is just really good. Eventually, our main character reveals that she's got a monster of her own that she keeps locked up. And Cassandra's monster asks if they want to have a kaiju-like fight, and the main character corrects the monster, saying that kaiju are giant monsters. And then the two just have a really funny conversation about the semantics of what a kaiju really refers to. Like, it's great. And honestly, that's what this whole episode should have been. I love the lighthearted, almost mundane dialogue between 2 characters with a monster on the loose, or the friendly arguments about trivial shit that doesn't really matter between a horrifying monster and a human. What I don't care for is, where the fuck was going on with Cassandra? The best part, too, is in the end, there's no epic fights or horrific slaughter. The two just sit there and talk. There's an idea here that I just wish got explored more, because honestly, what is there? It's gold. With a name like George Romero in 3D, I think it's pretty safe to say this one's going to be a zombie episode, and It is. But it has a few clever spins on the genre to make it a really interesting time. Basically, these kids find some never before released 3D comic books by the zombie man himself, George Romero. And one thing leads to another, and these zombies literally jump off the page and are now terrorizing this real world. But with a twist. These are invisible zombies, and can only be seen when wearing these 3D glasses. It's kind of like Limp Bizkit from part 6 of JoJo's.
That's the second fucking JoJo's reference in this video. God damn.
But this is a really cool setup, because there's only one pair of 3D glasses, so only one person can see the threat of zombies, while the others are just kind of in the dark. And they really do get some good mileage out of this too. Eventually, they decide to summon George Romero himself from the comic book, and he offers little to no help. He mainly just points out that he never actually referred to zombies as zombies, he just referred to them as ghouls. So, thanks for that, I guess, Georgie boy. But the main character's mom ends up getting bit, and the kids are just really desperate. So that's when they get the bright idea to just make George write a happy ending. So he ends up writing, destroy the glasses, destroy the ghouls. Therefore, once they rip the glasses, all the zombies cease to exist. And for a little cherry on top at the very end, the mom, who's now a full-on zombie, kills their landlord who has recently raised the rent. And it's like, that's cool and all, but the mom's still a zombie. So they gotta deal with that, I guess. But I love that ending. This is an episode that is so good, it's almost great. It's unfortunately hindered in one major aspect, that being character progression. I think Captain Alex turns a little fast in this episode. It borders on being unbelievable. Let me explain real quick. This episode sees two space cadets in, well, space. One Captain Alex and one co-captain Ted. And despite Alex being the captain of the ship, Ted is actually more celebrated and revered of the two because of his invention of this device. Simply put, it can control gravity. Technically it does something more than just control gravity, but I'm dumb. And in my notes I just said it controlled gravity. And the specifics don't really hinder the episode and doesn't really matter in the long run. I'm just pointing this out before someone does in the comments. Fuck you. And throughout this whole episode, Captain Alex is struggling with his inferiority complex. Because, as we find out, Alex's father was the first man on Mars, and he constantly hallucinates his own father disowning and talking down to him. Not only that, but when a news station calls in to interview the two, the newscaster is more interested in talking to Ted about his invention than Captain Alex about being a captain, I guess. This really gets to Alex. So suddenly, when their commander tells them that they have been in touch with aliens and is up to Ted to make first contact and not Alex, well, Alex kinda loses it. I mean, his dad was the first man on Mars. Ted was the first man to invent this gravity device, and Alex wants to have a legacy of his own. He wants to be the first to make contact with aliens. And so, he kills Ted in the gravity chamber. Yeah, just like that. Now, I know I'm just summarizing the episode, so some of you guys may infer that there is some natural escalation to get to this point. And by all means, they had all the steps involved, but it just happens a little too quick for me. Like, the very start of this episode sees these two avoiding some space debris, and Alex is all calm and collected, but then after that, they have the news interview, and it's like Alex just snaps. He immediately starts resenting and hating Ted. Hallucinations from his dad definitely play a big factor in this, and maybe there's some past history we're not privy to, but I feel like it's not enough to make this sudden turn believable. I think we just needed a little more time with these characters and a little more exploration of Alex as a character to really sell this. Because I'm not gonna lie, when Alex kills Ted, it's a little jarring and it feels like it happens far too soon. And look, I like all the build up to that point. I think it just happens far too fast. Ultimately, Alex pays a heavy price because, as it turns out, Ted was actually an undercover alien trying to show his fellow aliens that humankind is good. So instead of these aliens just killing Alex and moving on, they actually spare him and make him watch them destroy Earth, in turn making Alex the only human left alive, all alone, stuck in space. It's a perfect ending. This is an episode that, weirdly enough, kind of gets ruined by its implementation of more conventional horror elements. I feel like this episode truly had something in the first half and then kind of lost it in the second half.
Huh. Sounds like the Detroit Lions, am I right?
Dude, my fans are a bunch of horror nerds. They're not gonna get that. But, yeah. You see, this episode is all about Lydia and how she accidentally kills one of her employees / ex-lovers. This girl is up for promotion, but despite being very good at her job, Lydia passes her over and promotes this dude instead, mainly because these two were in a relationship, and it makes the whole scenario rather messy. They fight, and one thing leads to another, and Lydia accidentally kills her. Now, in this situation, do you just not touch anything and call the police right away because there's enough evidence there to prove it was an accident? Or do you try to get rid of the body yourself? Take a wild guess as to what Lydia tries to do. I mean, in all fairness, if Lydia just called the cops, there wouldn't exactly be a story here now, would there? And on the other hand, accident or not, a death is a death and it's bad for press. I mean, that's exactly why Lydia tries to dispose of this body in the first place, to protect her brand image. But the first half of this episode is just Lydia trying to get this body out of the building. She's having to check if the coast is clear and frantically waves off employees as they approach, and sneaking around the nightly cleaning crew, and praying that when those elevator doors open, nobody's on the other side. It's suspenseful as fuck, and I absolutely love it. Creepshow as a show is mostly about spectacle. A lot of these stories have some other elements at play, monsters, magic, ghosts, and so on and so on. And here I thought we finally got a subdued horror episode really feeding into the idea of just simply trying to get away with murder. And I mean, they were pulling it off. I was on the absolute edge of my seat throughout this episode. And when you think it couldn't get any worse, Lydia and the corpse of her lover are descending down the elevator when an earthquake hits, leaving them stuck in that elevator. So now the fire department has to help Lydia, but oh fuck, what do you do? They're gonna see the dead body. And then the episode starts doing reanimated corpse stuff, and you lost me. Granted, this could be seen as psychological horror. The episode is constantly making the audience question whether or not this is truly happening or if it's all in Lydia's mind. But to me, it's just a bit much considering the tone they set prior. And by all means, this sort of escalation does make sense for the story, but I think it misses out on the key foundation that really worked for me in the first place. So while this stuff is cute, it's not nearly as good as the first half. So this episode is a little unique for me because originally I didn't really like it. It ranked decently lower than it does now. But the more I reflected on this episode, the more I grew to appreciate it. Plain and simple, I didn't give this episode enough credit for what it really sets out to do. You see, this episode actually subverts a lot of horror cliches, but it's done in such a casual and nonchalant way that I didn't even really think about it until after the fact.
You guys gotta understand, Colin is pretty dumb.
Whoa, hey man, what the hell?
What? Tell me I'm wrong.
No. My initial problem with the episode was that there was no immediate threat throughout the entire episode. But really, that's because the main character is proactive and takes the necessary and logical steps to overcome each hurdle. So nothing really escalates to a level that would be classified as an immediate threat. Don't get me wrong, there's still a level of escalation throughout this episode, but none of that really affects the main character or her family. And it's just refreshing to see this in the horror genre. Now the plot is rather simple when it comes to this episode. A girl has a dollhouse complete with a family of dolls, but one day, mysteriously, a decapitated head appears within the dollhouse and slowly, one by one, kills all the family dolls. And this is what I mean by no threat. At no real point are the real characters ever affected by any of these scenarios. And what we end up watching is just a bunch of dolls being murdered, which, I do wish this episode played up the levity of the whole situation because, really, this episode plays this whole thing completely straight and serious, which I don't think is a bad tone to take, but not my preferred tone given the circumstances. But this is where the subversion takes place. Listen, I've seen my fair share of children's horror media at this point. Literally, so many of my ranking videos are just covering children's horror shows. I know what I'm talking about in this scenario. And the typical approach to a storyline like this would see the main character telling their parents what's going on, and their parents not believing them. But the main character in this episode is smart, and doesn't bother telling her parents anything, because she knows they're not going to believe her, and it would just cause more problems and more things to worry about in the long run. So this whole battle is kept to herself, and she silently handles business. After the first doll is murdered, she immediately goes to the store to buy a police doll to help protect the family. And this doesn't work. The officer gets murked rather fast. But it's a valiant effort from the main character, and I love her line of reasoning that comes next. If a police officer can't get rid of the head, then maybe something more spiritual will. So she gets a Native American shaman to hopefully get rid of the head problem. It's an understandable line of reasoning, and it really highlights how capable this little girl is of solving problems. Unfortunately, that doesn't work either, and the head proceeds to kill the entire family of dolls. The main character gets fed up and takes the head and throws it randomly in her room somewhere, which is pretty stupid to do so. But she's acting off of emotion and not reasoning. In fact, right before she goes to bed, she realizes how stupid that was and tries to go to look for it. And when she finds it, it's now life-size, which actually isn't a problem. You see, I thought all the events that happened in the dollhouse would now take place in the real world, but no. She puts the head back into the dollhouse and then immediately the next day gives the dollhouse away with the head to some other family. Like, I get she's taking precautions and whatnot, but it seems weird for the head to even become life-size in the first place if they really weren't going to do anything with it. I mean, maybe the sole purpose of this scene was supposed to scare and shock, but I just thought they were going down a different route for a second there. Overall, I can understand if some people find this episode a little lackluster. I mean, I did at first, but I think this episode has a little bit more going on than it's truly credited for. Doodles is an episode that is pretty fun throughout, but I think has a really clever ending that I genuinely didn't see coming. Simply put, this episode follows a person who realizes what she draws affects the real world, or more specifically, what she draws affects other people. Like, after getting rejected from some cartoonist job at some magazine company, in a somewhat childish fit of rage, our main character draws on the picture of the very same woman that got her job instead of her, with missing bloody eyes surrounded by rats, and the next day her corpse is found, having been eaten by rats and missing her eyes.
Oh, it's like the artist's version of Death Note.
I mean, yeah, it kind of is. Except there's no real explanation to why this is happening. Like, I thought maybe the pen was cursed or something like that, but nah. Honestly, this happens a lot in this show. Things just kind of happen with no explanation, and honestly, I'm cool with that. A lot of this show is just some good old-fashioned fun. Like, this very concept is fun, and I don't really need an explanation as to why this happens. And normally, in these types of storylines, you have the main character slowly figuring out that they're the ones causing all the chaos through their own actions. You know, it's pretty tropic. But I applaud this episode because the main character kinda knows what's going on the entire time. And she kinda doesn't give a fuck as she slowly works her way up this corporate ladder through murder. And don't worry, she of course meets her demise by the end. She tries to kill this one dude she went to high school with by using an old yearbook photo and succeeds. But the pen bleeds through to the next page, which just so happens to showcase her photo. So she meets the same exact fate. I just think that's a really clever ending. The Companion is a really simple story that has been done before plenty of different times. In essence, it pertains to the horrific ramifications of bringing someone back from the dead. And while this farmer character didn't intentionally set out to resurrect his dead wife, that's exactly what he did when he made this scarecrow. I mean, if he was truly trying to revive his dead wife, he probably wouldn't have made the scarecrow so fucking creepy. Or maybe he would. You know, maybe he's into that freaky shit. I'm not gonna judge. Now, there's some stuff in the present about two brothers, and how the younger of the two accidentally awakens the scarecrow creature, and it's all just fine. Luckily, a majority of this episode takes place in a flashback explaining the origins of this monster in the first place. Basically, this old farmer loses his wife and makes a scarecrow and attaches this felt heart to it as a symbolic gesture to his deceased wife, and it comes alive. And the two, despite one looking like a Spirit Halloween animatronic, actually live quite peacefully together. Until one day, a Girl Scout comes to their house to sell cookies, and yeah, turns out she can be a little possessive on who comes onto their land. So she just kills the Girl Scout. The farmer realizes his mistake and has this dreadful message about how it's painful to accept the deaths in our lives, but ultimately, it's a thing we must all come to terms with. So he kills the scarecrow, and then himself.
Don't you mean unalived?
Artie, I will kill myself before I say unalive. Now in the present, the main character removes the stick from the heart, so now the scarecrow is back, and the main character is being hunted down and chased, and they fight, and it's all kind of whatever. It's done well, don't get me wrong, but I think the true heart of this episode is within the farmer's backstory. You know, it's kind of like a fucked up version of Pixar's Up, if you think about it. And I'm not saying this doesn't work as one complete narrative, because it does, but it's like, they really knocked it out of the park in the middle portion of the episode, and the rest is just pretty solid. This one's special for being the only fully animated Creepshow episode, and to critique the animation quality off the bat, it's solid. Admittedly, I'm a bit mixed on the animation quality. It's very limited, I think. On one hand, the animation really picks up during certain parts of the episode, mainly on the action sequences, and in that regard, this looks great. On the other hand, it's very stilted in all other regards, namely between dialogue scenes. There's this one part in particular in the library where it's a shot reverse shot of two characters talking, and it just looks bad. I mean, it just feels really lazy. Normally, it's a little bit excusable, but the voice acting in this episode is really good. And because of that, sometimes the animation doesn't tonally match the acting, and the whole thing just makes it feel off because of it. That being said, it's good where it counts, and that's all that matters, I guess. This episode's all about a town-wide conspiracy that our main character is trying to get to the bottom of. It's not the most complicated story out there, and the twists and turns aren't really that big, but they're good regardless. Truly, this mystery sells this whole episode, and oftentimes when using a different medium, such as animation in this case, we have to ask ourselves to what purpose. And throughout the majority of this episode, I couldn't figure out why this was animated. And then we get to the final 5 minutes of the episode, and it's like, okay, yeah, this would have been impossible to do in live action without an insanely high budget. So even if the animation is a bit rough at times, in the end, it's worth it. From the title alone, To Grandmother's House We Go, you could probably tell that it's just a modernized retelling of the Little Red Riding Hood story. And, well, it kind of is. The way I like to describe this episode, and the way I have it written down in my notes, is it's basically the Little Red Riding Hood, but with Trisha Paytas as the lead character. Because that's what it essentially is. From the fashion to the personality, our main character might as well just be Trisha Paytas. But basically, our main character is a gold digger, and she marries this old guy pretty explicitly so he can pass away and she can collect his money. And in no time flat, she does just that. However, the old man's ex-wife suspects foul play and tells our main character she won't see a single cent unless she looks after his granddaughter. And she's able to pull some strings because she's the manager of his estate. And now, I guess, Trisha Paytas has to raise this child. Like, could you imagine that happened in real life? Oh, wait, Sherry has a kid. Oh, fuck! There's another? But this whole episode is about this main character trying to protect and save her step-granddaughter from these werewolves. It's pretty simple, but the action is good, and the overall story and the banter between these two characters is really touching. By the end, Trisha Paytas even considers the little girl to be her own daughter, and that's really all there is to it. It's definitely worth checking out. Drug Traffic is an episode centralized around the American healthcare system, more specifically about how hard it is for some people to get the proper medication, and the great lengths they will go through in order to get it. I think this is the most political Creepshow gets with its commentary. Not to say it hasn't before. This show isn't afraid to get political, which is totally cool, but this is the most head-on I think the show ever tackles something. From start to finish, it's very blatant with its message, and it's done rather well. Until it isn't. But I'll get to that. But this episode follows this congressman during a campaign trail as he's looking to get elected as, I don't know, some higher authority than he currently is. But all of his actions throughout this episode is just one big performance piece. He acts one way when the cameras are rolling, and one way when the cameras aren't. He's constantly trying to stage or blow up scenarios out of proportion to make himself look good, and honestly, it's kind of scary.
Yeah, scary how accurate it is to real government officials. Hey,
Meanwhile, we got this border security officer who's a straight-up communist. Like, he says so himself. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the simple story on this one is that after a campaign trail, these people are set to re-enter America, but of course, they have to go through border patrol. And none of these other people matter, except for this mother and her daughter. You see, the daughter has some sort of condition where she is constantly hungry, and the two left the country in the first place to get cheaper medicine, because they couldn't afford it in the States. However, the border patrol officer sees this and is like, alright, I'm gonna have to contain you. Meanwhile, the congressman is blowing the whole thing out of proportion and twisting the narrative to make it about discrimination. So the mother and daughter are separated, but more importantly, the daughter is left alone without her medication. So the officer and the mother go to the holding area with the congressman outside still making a scene for the camera. It's here where the patrol officer reveals that he's on her side, and the people have the right to affordable medication. It's just that because this congressman is here with the camera recording everything, he had to detain her to make it look real, or otherwise the footage would get out and get him in trouble. And this whole time, this poor mother is just pleading with them, saying that she has to get this medication to her daughter. But like, realistically, how bad can her daughter be right now? Okay. So yeah, the daughter becomes just a floating head with her lungs and entrails hanging below her neck. This is also known as Krassu, a spirit from Southeast Asian folklore. I thought the design was way too specific to be an original thing, and no, it's not. It's that thing. But yeah, she proceeds to kill everybody. So in essence, this congressman forced his patrol officer to separate the two because of his camera and performative actions. So he may say he's for the people, but all the people are dead. Just like a true congressman. In the end, these two just shoot the body the head was originally detached from, and it seems to kill her. And then they just sit together and talk and just fucking spoon feed you the message of the episode. It's so lazy, and trust me, it's not like they're exactly subtle in the first place. I got it on the first watch. Honestly, this scene feels like it's just talking down to the audience a little bit, and should just be cut out. But other than that, this was a great episode. I don't know what it is, but if you take a parent and turn them into some sort of plant monster, you get some of the best body horror out there. I mean, it worked for Goosebumps, and it certainly works for this episode. Now, this episode is pretty standard. You can predict where the story is going from square one, and it'll hit all the beats you would expect. However, the execution is done so well, I can't help but to label this episode as great. So, this story starts with a mother trying to run away with her son so they could live at their grandma's house. Why? Well, because her husband, and this kid's dad, is a racist, abusive dickhead. Unfortunately, they're unsuccessful with running away, and the dad just catches the two and chastises the mom. And then he and his friends proceed to take her for a ride. And they just straight up kill her and end up burying the body in her very own garden in the backyard. But the kid is unaware of all of this and ends up finding seeds his mom left for him and plants them in the garden. So yeah, not for nothing, but I think everybody can see where this one is heading. After accidentally bleeding on the soil, the mom starts slowly coming back as a plant monster, and the son slowly starts feeding these dickheads to her so she can grow even stronger. So we already know this dad's an ass, but his friends and accomplices are pretty much mini versions of him. And then there's this woman who, by all means, is probably the better of the three. Like, she's actually there for the son and offers kind words and is pretty nice. But, turns out the dad was cheating with her throughout his marriage. And also, I guess she did help cover up a murder, so she's gone. But yeah, that's all this episode is, but the progression of this episode is fantastic, with equally great makeup and effects to boot. After the son kills everyone, he makes his way to his grandma's house with the dead mom flowers to boot. It's just a simple story done very well. This episode is amazing at taking a classic horror setting, such as the zombie apocalypse, and telling a story innately original and unique. I mean, you hear zombie apocalypse and you think band of people fight off zombies with inner turmoil within, right? Well, not here. That girl named Sue tells an emotionally human story that subverts all known expectations. Now, at the start, it's not abundantly clear that this world is infested with zombies, but it's a detail these characters reveal so naturally, I almost had to do a double take to make sure I heard it right. You see, yeah, this is set during the zombie apocalypse. However, this is set in a rural, small town. Everyone and their grandmas are packing heat around here, and the zombies, in their slow, shambling state, really aren't a threat. It kind of reminds me of the start of Dawn of the Dead, where the local news broadcasts are showing how people from the South are pretty chill during the zombie apocalypse. Like, they all live out in the countryside, so they can see zombies coming from literal miles away. And of course, they're all packing heat. So they're all just having a fun time shooting zombies and drinking beer. It's a detail that makes that movie's world feel fully realized. And it's one that makes this episode feel so realized as well. But this episode centers around this police officer, as he tries to calm down local residents as they are all trying to find this one person and kill him. The person in question is this guy, and what makes him so hated is that he killed a little girl. His excuse is that she was a zombie, and the police officer, and we the audience, struggle to grapple with the truth. Did this guy kill this girl in cold blood, or was she truly a zombie? It's a question that just lingers throughout this episode, and really makes us, the audience, think. But it's also a great moral quandary to pose during the midst of a zombie apocalypse. The police officer is more inclined to believe, and just put this guy behind bars to let the justice system do its job. Hence why he's trying not to let the townspeople find him, since, well, they'll kill him. Dead on the spot. But eventually the policeman finds enough evidence that he did just kill her in cold blood, so he takes him to prison, sure, but he also rounds up all the townspeople to deliver a truly just punishment. You see, instead of just killing him, they release the girl he killed, who is now a zombie, to take him out. And this is just one of the most satisfying deaths in this entire show. This episode may be about zombies, but its humanity is at the forefront. Now, I completely understand that your enjoyment of this episode could possibly hinder on whether or not you have seen the Evil Dead series of movies. And while I personally love this episode, I did stop and ask myself if this would work for someone unfamiliar with Evil Dead, and I would have to rank it through that lens. But then I thought, this is my ranking video, so fuck it. This episode's awesome, and I only place so much emphasis on the Evil Dead stuff because this episode, yeah, it's just Evil Dead set on a studio lot. And when I say it's Evil Dead, I'm not saying it's like Evil Dead. I'm point blank telling you, it's literally Evil Dead. They have the legit Necronomicon, complete with the same chants, and legit Deadites in proper makeup and everything. I mean, hell, if you want more of a seal of approval for this, they even got Ted Raimi to star in this episode. Yeah, it's not Sam Raimi, but any Evil Dead fan would tell you how important of a part Ted played throughout the Evil Dead series. Also, Ted just looks a lot like Sam. It's kinda crazy. But basically, this story takes place on a television lot, and there's essentially 3 shows being filmed that are important to the story. You got this children's book reading show that is the most popular show on the lot. Then you got this antique appraisal show, and then you got this show that is essentially the Bob Ross painting show that is actually in danger of being cancelled. And then it gets cancelled. Meanwhile, on the antique appraisal show, Ted shows off the Necronomicon, and the host is dumb enough to read it out loud, turning Ted into a Deadite. For non-Evil Dead fans out there, Deadites aren't really zombies. They're more like demonic possessed animated corpses that can do a bunch of different things, such as the ability to fly. But now it's up to Bob Ross, his camera guy, and this kind-hearted producer lady to stop the Deadite from reading the book on live television. You see, the children's show is so popular, it's going to have a live broadcast across the world. So if the Deadite can read from the Necronomicon on live TV, that essentially means there's going to be a whole lot of Deadites everywhere. However, this isn't really too much for our Bob Ross character since he's an ex-Marine. And essentially what we get is, well, a bunch of fun Evil Dead shenanigans. They got the classic camera movements and everything. In the end, this episode is just really groovy. It's amazing how this episode actually was able to show legit iMessage and FaceTime functionality. Usually in television shows, getting the licensing rights to showcase such things as iMessage can be a little tricky, if not super expensive, so I applaud the show for going through with this. Now, to be honest, this episode isn't particularly scary. In fact, I don't think it's really scary at all, until the ending that is. But this one ranks so highly solely because it's a good story. You see, the episode centers around our main character, who is a young broke 20-something barely getting by. Welcome to the club, you poor bastard. But upon getting back home from visiting his parents, turns out there's a man in his suitcase. Despite how it may look, the man is still alive. And our main character tries to get him out, which causes great pain, and then the man coughs up a gold coin. The man in the suitcase reveals that he is able to produce gold coins when he feels immense amounts of pain. So our main character takes the gold coin to a pawn shop to gauge the authenticity, but also to see how much it's worth. He gets a quote, but then asks of his roommate if it's a fair price, in which we learn that the coin is worth $500. So one thing leads to another, and his roommate and his ex find out about the man in the suitcase, and learn how he produces coins. Yeah, the ex-girlfriend. At the start of the episode, the main character gets broken up with by his girlfriend because he's broke and he had to visit his parents to beg for money. So the 3 just debate the moral quandaries of this particular situation they have found themselves in. And what I really mean is that the main character and ex talk about the moral quandaries while the roommate leads by example. And once they see all that gold, yeah, torturing this man becomes a no-brainer. However, the main character does establish one rule. That being that they can only torture this man for 48 hours and make as much gold as they possibly can and then release him. And then we get, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a really fun torture montage intercut with the 3 buying shit and I think the commentary is pretty on the nose here, so not really worth getting into all of that. And this episode's got some fun twists along the way and a truly great ending. It may be on the nose, but this episode is really great. Bad Wolf Down is about werewolves fighting Nazis. I mean, you can't get any more simple than that. I mean, from the premise alone, you would expect just a stupid, dumb, and fun episode. And, well, yeah, it is. It's fucking werewolves fighting Nazis. But I do realize I'm selling it a bit short. There are more layers to this episode than just the premise, but, I mean, I mean, come on.
It's like Call of Duty Zombies. Sure, there's a story there, but people just care about shooting zombies. Right?
That's actually a horrible analogy. People love their Call of Duty zombie lore, and myself included. But I don't know what else to say. It's a lot of fun. Check it out. This episode is equal parts fun and emotional and really... Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh.
You okay, man?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just gotta go to the bathroom real quick, Artie. Just cover for me till I get back.
He doesn't pay me enough to do that.
Model Kid is probably one of the most popular stories to come out of the Creepshow series, probably because it's in the same episode as Bob Ross vs. the Evil Dead, and that is the biggest segment. I think everybody's heard about that. Despite being tacked on with that goofy segment, Model Kid is actually a pretty tragic and dark tale of a boy who sadly loses his mom to cancer and has to endure an abusive guardian for a few months, until he can get his revenge. The episode follows a kid named Joe who's obsessed with horror films, to the point where his room is absolutely covered with really cool horror movie memorabilia. Sadly, his mom is dying of cancer and she's getting a little too weak, so Joe's aunt and uncle offer to move in and stick around and help out. Usually this wouldn't be an issue and might actually be kind of fun to some kids, but his uncle Kevin kinda sucks. He's that guy at the family gatherings. You know the ones. The uncle that just knows everything about everything and sucks the life out of the party.
Bela Lugosi was a dope addict.
Yeah, he's pretty horrible. And on top of his actual bullies, Joe also gets bullied by his uncle for liking horror stuff and not liking normal boy stuff like sports or girls. And his uncle feels like it's his duty to make Joe a man, even though Kevin isn't much of a man himself. But sadly, before his aunt and uncle even have a chance to move in, Joe's mom, June, passes away. Her and Joe were cuddled up watching old horror movies together, and she passed away in her sleep with her son in her arms. It's a pretty tragic, but also a very sweet scene at the same time. But after that, we time skip to a couple of months later, and Joe's aunt and uncle have officially moved in, and they're all cozy and nice in their new house. This is where we learn that Kevin is more of a piece of shit than we knew before. Yeah, you see, they were going to move in with Joe and his mom because Kevin can't and doesn't want to find a job. And not only is he an alcoholic bum, but he also abuses Aunt Barb and Joe. One night after a particularly bad day, Joe is crying and he sees a vision of his mom handing him a Creepshow comic, and in that comic is a voodoo doll called The Victim. So Joe writes his uncle's name on the doll in the paper and orders it. And when it gets to its house and he puts it together, Joe discovers that it works a little too well. So he stages a scene where a couple of his horror toys, as Kevin would call them, they beat up Kevin and literally rip him in half for his wife Barb to come home and find. It's a pretty awesome scene. I really like that scene. I personally really like this episode a lot. It's got a lot of the classic Creepshow elements and moments in here, like the stingers when Kevin sees both of the monsters for the first time, as well as the classic Creepshow lighting, like with the bright greens and red lights everywhere. And it's also got incredible monster design. Creepshow always has incredible monster designs, but I think this episode has some of the best. They're all practical and they look amazing. I mean, the gill monster's mouth even moves. It's awesome. They also have a Frankenstein monster in the middle of the segment, and it's the best damn Frankenstein I've ever seen. Well, I don't know about that one. The one at Epic Universe is pretty sick. As for the story itself, I think it's really good. They tug at your heartstrings at the beginning by letting you see how loving Joe's mom is, and then they instantly rip her away from you and give you this douchebag.
What are you doing in here? Sniffing glue?
Yeah, I know, the whole reason Kevin is there is for us to hate him, but oh my god, I don't think I've ever seen someone else so lame, so annoying, and just downright evil. I will say this episode does feel a bit goofy at times, and there really isn't anything that scary in the episode besides the Ring-esque moment Joe has with his mom, but it is pretty satisfying seeing him ripped in half on the ground at the end. If it was my personal ranking, I'd put this episode in like top 5, maybe even top 3, but knowing Colin, it's probably like number 7 or something.
Okay, I'm back, and I'm finally ready to talk about Model Kid.
Oh, no, dude. That Kingnusmi guy came by and did the whole segment for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man. It's crazy to see what an actually good YouTuber sounds like on his channel for once.
Okay, man, fuck you. But yeah, I agree with Kingnusmi. This is a great episode. Also, I know he's a bigger YouTuber than me, but show his channel some love. Mwah. I know. I'm just as surprised as you that an episode starring King Batch ranked this highly.
Only a spoonful.
What the dog doing though?
Yeah, but that backflip though.
I think that's all the King Batch quotes that I know.
Yeah, good thing too. I think we just lost hella subscribers from this stupid bit.
But I'll give the man some credit. He's actually a pretty good actor. He didn't blow me away or anything like that, but his acting never actively took me out of the episode. But this episode sees King Batch as he is followed around by his familiar. A familiar is basically this demon thing that can take the form of any loved ones. And I love the design of this monster because you barely get to see it. There's a great shot of the monster moving in the background, and none of the characters even seem to notice. It's genuinely eerie as hell. But a psychic warns King Batch of all of this, and the only way to get rid of this thing is to capture it in a crate and drown it. So King Batch goes through all this effort and sets up this giant trap, and he catches the familiar. However, he starts to hear barking from inside the crate and goes to let out his dog, except that ain't his dog.
What the dog doing?
No, dude, we already exhausted the bit dry. We're not starting this up again. So, yeah, King Batch kind of forgot the main rule of this monster, being that it can transform into anyone. So when he tries again and hears his girlfriend from the inside pleading to be let out, King Batch won't be fooled again. So he takes that crate down to the lake to drown the familiar, and we all kind of know where this is going, right? He actually ends up accidentally killing his girlfriend. And then the familiar taunts him with a dead, bloated corpse. And that's the episode. While the ending can be seen coming from a mile away, the execution is still fantastic, and the dread that sets in after the fact is spectacular. Meter Reader is such a badass episode. It's got its own fleshed out mythos and lore. It feels uniquely original, yet still wears its inspirations proudly on its sleeves. It has such a style and flair to its framing and camera work, and essentially, it's just a zombie episode, kind of, but it really is its own thing. One of the hardest parts about writing anything is not just making a realized world, but revealing that world to an audience in a natural way. And Meter Reader somehow pulls it off seamlessly. You see, in this world, demons have taken over. Basically, people can be possessed by demons and must be decapitated to stop the spread. So in its wake, these Meter Readers, who are, as the show puts it, average people doing hero work. Now, you may think this would be some post-apocalyptic setting, but it's not? Like, civilization has not fallen. In fact, many people still have running water and electricity and even fucking internet. Hell, we even have characters talking about how supermarkets and schools are going to be opening up again soon, and wait a minute. Is this episode about COVID? Well, it did come out in October of 2021, and yeah, I guess this episode is some kind of allegory for COVID. Not to say I don't think stories like this would be bad, but after the pandemic, there are so many episodes from so many different shows centered around COVID that they all kind of felt the same. But this episode? Nah, dude. They made this shit badass. The actual story is rather simple. Basically, a dad comes home after a mission of being a meter reader, except the daughter doesn't trust him and thinks he's infected, and so she makes him stay in the storm shed outside. Well, the mother and the son were too eager to see him again, so they break the quarantine and end up infected. In actuality, the dad was never possessed, but now the son and mother are. So after the dad passes away from his wounds from fighting the mother and son, the daughter kills the son and the mother and picks up her dad's legacy by becoming a new meter reader. I know I skimmed over all of this, but the family drama is really top notch, and the action scenes in the storm cellar have a really good balance between being scary and creepy, but also just fun. Overall, this world is amazing, and one I feel an entire TV series could be set in. That's how realized this world is, and it was all set up and done with in just 20 minutes nonetheless. That's crazy. Gray Matter is not only the first episode, but the first story segment in this show. So they really came out swinging, doubly so with its cast, with Mr. Jigsaw himself, Tobin Bell, and bugging out himself, Giancarlo Esposito. I mean, look, everybody loves Giancarlo for his performance as Gus, and me too, by all means. But my man does not get enough credit for his role as Buggin' Out. Granted, these two don't really have the most screen time in this episode. Really, they're only in there at the very start and at the very end, but their presence is still great to see. But this episode is truly fantastic, and I think a large contributing factor being its sense of pacing. Not a second is wasted, and the whole thing just truly builds and builds until we get to the very end where, well, goddamn. But we'll get to that. This episode centers around a small town going through a nasty storm, in which all of its residents have evacuated except for these four. The shopkeeper, the sheriff, Giancarlo, and this young boy, who comes rushing into their makeshift shelter crying about how his dad isn't right. So the sheriff and Giancarlo decide to pay this boy's dad a visit, as secretly, the whole town knows that after the recent passing of his wife, he hasn't been taking care of himself. Mainly he's succumbing to alcoholism. So while these two set off to have a word with the dad, the boy relays the past couple of months to the shopkeep. He talks about how slowly his dad has been drinking more and going out less and less. But even his behavior has changed over time, like his sudden infatuation with soap operas. That little detail doesn't really have any relevance in the grand scheme of things, but it's a little detail I like that they included. Kinda just makes the character feel a little more real and personable. But slowly the dad starts deteriorating. Particularly, he becomes more slimy and goopy. And not only does this give a nice gradual sense of body horror, but the direction is very well done too. Because the worse the dad gets, the less we see of him. He begins to be hidden in shadows or covers himself with blankets. So we, the audience, just get a sense of what's truly going on. But not only does the dad get worse, so does the house. The house at the start looks like your typical small town countryside house, but by the end, it looks like the house out of Resident Evil 7. And then the dad suddenly has a craving for more than just beer. He starts craving flesh. And while it starts off with rodents like squirrels and rats, it rapidly escalates to cats and dogs, and eventually, humans. And the son, set to keep his dad alive, finds poor victims and leads them to their slaughter. This is when the revelation is made. With the storm and all of its residents leaving, the boy has no one else to feed his dad. So he didn't send those two guys to check up on his dad, he sent them to their death. And this is when we get this final creature design, and it is truly horrifying. It's a good mix of practical effects and CGI, and the lighting is still on the darker side, only showing us glimpses of the monster at a time. And while Tobin Bell wasn't so lucky, at least Giancarlo was able to escape. And I wish I could say the episode ends right there, but in the final minutes, the episode kinda muddies the water a little bit. You see, in the literal final minutes, the characters exclaim how the creature is multiplying with each victim it consumes. We even have the shopkeep crunching numbers, saying that at this rate, everyone in the world will die in 6 days? This is all happening while the monster is attacking the shop, by the way. And then the episode ends with everyone dying. Now, I hate this detail because it's just kind of unnecessary. The threat in this episode doesn't have to be this whole world-ending monster. In fact, I think it works better on a local, smaller scale given the setting of a small town. And I mean, I get it. The episode starts with these comic book panels talking about catastrophic events, like earthquakes, tornadoes, and tsunamis, and so on and so on. And so this final revelation is supposed to be tied back into that. However, I don't think that theme was properly displayed throughout this episode. In fact, that revelation comes completely out of nowhere and completely blindsided me. It left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but the rest of the episode was so good that I don't care. This episode follows a family of vampires in a world where vampires are just a normal part of society. I mean, that being said, they're not openly accepted by society. Yeah, vampires are pretty discriminated against in this world, but it's an aspect that makes this world feel more realized. Furthering that point, I like a lot of the little details in this episode. Like when the Belascos move into their new house, they use this service called Fly By Night, which is a moving company exclusively used to move vampires. And they arrive in their new house in their coffins already. They have drip brewed blood coffee. Instead of Tang, they have a product called Fang. And they even got this blood infused maple syrup. And like, yeah, you could argue that all this is hokey as shit. And like, fair enough. I just think it's really fun. And this episode isn't afraid to have fun. Truly, the start of this episode feels like What We Do in the Shadows, but at the same time, it has its own identity, because at the heart of this episode, it's a love story, and a pretty damn good one at that. And personally, I don't care for love stories, so I think that speaks volumes to how good this one is to rank number 3 overall. I had no breath control on that one. That was my bad. You see, when the vampire family moves in, the boy next door falls in love with their daughter, which is a big problem because the dad, well, he's a bigot and hates vampires. But slowly, these two start talking and eventually start dating, and every aspect of the relationship is just so nice and pleasant. It just feels so natural, and it's such a cute relationship. Eventually, the human dad forbids the son from seeing the daughter, telling him the truth that his mother was killed by a vampire, and that's why he hates them. But that's not actually the truth. The truth is, their mom got turned into a vampire, and the dad just killed her. But this doesn't waver the son's love for his girlfriend, and he wants to run away with her, and he even wants to become a vampire himself. And realistically, the girl tells him she won't do it because it's not fun being a vampire. There's so many downsides to it. But suddenly, the dad and a couple of his buddies come to kill her. But like, she's a vampire. And once she takes on her true form, yeah, they're really no match for her. At a certain point in the battle, the son is hurt real bad and needs to be taken to the hospital. He can't make it on his own, and the girlfriend has to carry him there herself. But the only problem being that the sun is about to come up. So the boyfriend is pleading to the girlfriend to just let him die and succumb to his injuries to let her live. But as a sacrifice, she carries him into the hospital. With the full sun out now, she slowly burns away, and god damn it. It's so schmaltzy, but it's so fucking good, dude. The boy lives, but so does the father. And as a final twist of irony, the dad is turned into a vampire, the very thing he hates, and is taken out by his own son. And damn, it's such a great episode. I just want to say this up front. This episode isn't really scary, like, even in the slightest. Okay, maybe it's existentially horrific more than anything else, but I wouldn't classify this episode as scary in the classic sense. Instead, it's just a really fucking good story. Like, holy shit. And it's a simple one at that. Basically, after our character's grandma passes away, she leaves him some sort of cabinet thing. But it's not just any ordinary cabinet, because once inside, time basically freezes on the outside. Well, actually, time doesn't really freeze. It's more like it moves really, 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 really slowly. Colin, just keep the entire thing in there. I don't care. It's kind of like the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z, except the exact time discrepancy is never truly stated. I think from my own observation, I would say 1 year in the cabinet would equate to about 1 second in the real world. However, there's one very simple rule our main character has to follow. He must enter the cabinet with the key. You see, it locks itself shut once something or someone enters it, so you best have that key when you go in so you can get out. But we basically follow our main character as he becomes an adult. You see, our main character is studying to become a lawyer, and with the help of the cabinet, he utilizes the extra time to study. And before you know it, he graduates and becomes a lawyer. He falls in love and starts working for a law firm and gets married. And slowly, he starts working his way through the ranks at the law firm, using the extra time to his advantage, of course. Within a couple of years, he becomes a senior associate, and then eventually a junior partner. And during this time, he even has a kid, but Unfortunately, his use of this cabinet is slowly starting to catch up with him. You see, he's at the top of his field because of his extensive use of this cabinet. However, his body never stopped aging during all that time, so he starts suffering from some problems. His doctor even tells him that he's in perfect health for someone that's 10 years older than him. So yeah, the dude is basically 10 years older than what he should be, and his wife is starting to worry. And then we get some great introspective moments from our main character. I mean, we the audience got to watch him go from some dude in college to a full-on father. And the fatherhood thing is what really gets to him. I mean, he has a kid now, and ultimately he realizes he wants to be there for his family, and that's more important than his work. So he stops using the cabinet. For a couple of years too. It seems like he's finally prioritizing his family, until a chance at promotion comes around at work. Our main character finds out that there's a short list of candidates for the position of senior partner, and he's not on that list. After he stopped using the cabinet, he slowly started slipping from his prestigious work ethic he once held in the world of law. So one night, he finally decides to go back into the cabinet, placing the key into his jacket pocket. But once he sits down, he realizes that his family means more to him than work. So he goes to exit, but turns out there was a hole in his pocket, and he just walked into the cabinet without the key. Then, in a truly terrifying moment, all our main character can do is watch through the peephole as he watches his son slowly pick up the key from the outside. Meanwhile, his body is rapidly aging. And when his son eventually does open the door, he's nothing but dust. I truly love this episode because through the whole thing, we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. We know this man's obsession with work is unhealthy, and his utilization of this cabinet is toxic. And the worst part is, when he finally truly realizes that his family means more to him than his work, he messed up and is trapped in the cabinet. And even worse than that, he has to watch his son, in very slow motion, pick up the key and unknowingly try to save him. From our perspective, this scene is just about a half a minute long, or whatever. But from our main character's perspective, he's stuck looking at his son for literal decades as he slowly dies. He's slowly dying all while looking at the very life he could have lived, and at the son he will never get to embrace again. And to top it all off, at the very end, the kid walks into the cabinet without the key, which is like completely unnecessary. But the tragedy of it all makes it hauntingly beautiful. All Hallows Eve is the best episode of Creepshow. It's emotional, it's got a mystery, it's unsettling, it's creepy, it's eerie, it subverts your expectations, and it pays off what the entire episode has been building up to the entire time. And best of all, it takes place on Halloween. I love episodes set on Halloween. Now, it's becoming a bit more customary around here for me to kind of not spoil or really go into the number one episode, just because I want to give people a chance to really check this episode out for themselves. And I think I'm going to take that route again. But this episode centers around this group of kids, and they just seem like your typical average kids, and everything seems good until they visit their first house. And immediately, the tone takes a hard shift, and everything seems off. These adults are not just scared of these kids, but downright terrified of these kids. And then they shift from acting like everyday typical kids to acting like bullies, insulting the adults and making all sorts of demands. And at least for the first house, it seems like these kids are some local ruffians, and perhaps this guy is just scared of them, like egging their house or whatever. But it's the second house where everything changes and it becomes darker. Now I'm going to leave it there because I want people to experience this episode for themselves for the first time. This episode needs to be watched with unspoiled eyes. So overall, I think Creepshow is a bit of a mixed bag, but I think every episode is kind of worth checking out. Simply because I think all the creature effects in this show are hands down amazing. Anyways, Shout out to the channel members for supporting me directly. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want your name in the credits in future videos, along with a bunch of other perks, a link will be in the description down below. But that actually reminds me, I recently polled my channel members to see what I would rank next, and I think the results are in. Artie? Okay, cool. I guess I'll see you guys next time in that ranking video. I didn't know how to end this in a funny way. So this is just how I was gonna end.